Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Lori's gonna give us the rundown.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is RCEA Board Clerk Lori Taketa. Before Chair Sarah Schaefer calls this in-person and online meeting to order, here are some announcements. For those of you here at the Wharfinger Building, the microphones will be on throughout the meeting. One speaker at a time, please, and please say your name when you start talking so remote participants can follow the discussion. There are no online board members for this meeting. And no members of the public present. So email public comments are accepted before and during the meeting at publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. And for the remote participants, there are a couple of people who we will be promoting to panelists when your staff report comes up. If you don't mind, please unmuting yourself at that time so we can hear you. And people who are online, if you experience phone or internet disruptions during this meeting, please notify if possible by calling or texting 707-382-7336 or by emailing publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. That's all for participation.
Okay, so we will call the May 23rd meeting of the RCEA Board of Directors to order, and can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. Director Arroyo.
Here.
Vice Chair Scott Howard.
Here.
And Director Jorgensen. Here. Director Mobley. Here. Director Frankie Myers is absent. Director Ramos.
Here.
Director Scafani. Here. Chair Schaefer.
Here.
Director Tuttle.
Here.
Director Wilson.
Here.
Director Wood.
Here.
There is a quorum present.
Thank you, Lori. All right, and we have no directors participating remotely. So our next item is reports from member entities. So do we have any members of the board to report out? All right, not seeing any, that'll take us to oral and written communications. This is to address the board for matters that are not on the agenda. Do we have anybody here in person who can make public comment? And not seeing anybody, do we have anybody online? No. All right, that will take us then to the consent calendar. So all matters on the consent calendar are considered routine by the board and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items, and if discussion is required, that item can be removed from consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, board members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. We have item 4.1, approve the minutes of the April 22nd, 2024 board special meeting. Item 4.2, approve disbursement reports. Item 4.3, accept financial reports. 4.4, authorize amendment to 2021 task order 1 for the operational services with the Energy Authority Incorporated, and authorize the interim executive director to execute the amendment and all associated documents. 4.5, accept quarterly budget report for fiscal year 2023-2024 Q3. Item 4.6, approve resolution 2024-5, approving the form of and authorizing the execution of the second amendment to the power purchase agreement with Fossil Clean Power A LLC and the first amendment to the power purchase agreement with Fossil Clean Power B LLC. 4.7, accept regulatory and legislative reports, and item 4.8, approve payment of California Community Power JPA annual general and administrative dues up to $136,463.60 for fiscal year 2024-25, and approve payment of Community Choice Association annual dues up to $112,375 for fiscal year 2024-25. Do we have any members of the board that would like to take an item from the consent calendar? Okay, not seeing anybody from the public, not seeing anybody here, anybody on Zoom. All right, then I'll take a motion for the consent calendar. Okay, motion by Director Mobley, second by Vice Chair Bauer. We're all here in person, so we can do a show of hands vote. All in favor, aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. And votes. So that will take us into old business. There's no CCE business today, and so we'll move directly into 6.1, risk policy procurement limit adjustments. And so we have Director Richard Engel to report.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As you all know, we have an energy risk management policy that has been approved by the board with periodic updates. And contained within that policy, there is this table which delineates limits on how much different actors can approve new deals. And these transactions can be limited by dollar amounts, by volume limits when it comes to energy transactions. And then term and maturity limits. The difference between those being the maturity limit means how far from today when the deal is approved does it end. The term limit is what amount of time can the deal span. So I'm just here to talk to you today about a proposed change to that last column on the right, the capacity transaction value limit. So the Energy Authority, who does a lot of our short-term procurement on our behalf, at the bottom of the table can transact deals of up to $1.5 million on our behalf. Our executive director can transact up to $3 million. Our risk management team, which consists of several of us staff members at director level, can approve deals up to $5 million. Anything above that needs to come to you for review and approval. So the left-hand part of this table shows how those values were originally set in 2016 when we first approved, the board first approved a risk policy. And in 2020 and 2022, those numbers were increased. And this was just to kind of keep up with what was happening to the market value of resource adequacy, which is the energy products that we're transacting under this dollar limit. So that's capacity payments that we're required to make to sellers of capacity per California Public Utilities Commission requirements. So these prices have really escalated in the last year and a half or so since that last change was approved. So what we're looking for today is approval for a further increase, and you'll note that this time it's substantially larger than any of the approvals that have happened before. That's just reflective of what's happened to those prices. So the staff recommendation would have you approving an increase that's large enough to kind of keep up with how resource adequacy prices have increased to date, and putting a little bit of extra cushion on there to account for the amount of increase that we expect to see in the coming year or so. Proposal B is a more modest version of this, which really only accounts for actual price increases seen to date. So if you were to adopt proposal B, it's more likely we would be having to come back to in the not too distant future for another increase. So just some of the justifications for this, I've already covered a couple of these. But these were set back with the prices that we were seeing when we first launched the program and made those adjustments as needed. There's been about a tripling of prices since late 2022. Resource adequacy is a market where transactions happen quickly. Since the board only meets once a month, we would really risk missing out on some of the most attractive deals that we transact if we needed to bring these to the board for approval. The risk management team, in contrast, can and does confer on short notice to review these things and approve them by a vote. And so, just as I mentioned, there's that difference between proposal A and proposal B in terms of how long we expect that to be helpful for. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Richard. Do we have any questions? Not seeing any, we'll open it up for public comment. Not seeing any or online. Okay, well, I'll bring it back to the board for any final comments, questions, or a motion on this staff recommendation.
Yeah. Actually, I should have this before. About how often does it happen that each one of these, different entities, that was on the right, the left-hand column? How often do they have to make one of those kinds of decisions? Is it every time we're changing by energy, right?
Yeah, it's there are a lot of transactions. We have a monthly meeting with the Energy Authority, in which they will usually show us our current position on resource adequacy and show us where the gaps are and how much they need to transact to fill those gaps. And in the majority of cases, most of the transactions do happen at that level where they can approve them themselves, but they do routinely run those RA transactions through us, and so Eileen signs off on them. But they're usually in a low enough level where, according to the policy, they wouldn't really have to do that. It's been pretty rare for them to even come up to the level where the risk team needs to approve them explicitly. What we usually do in those meetings is they show us the positions, we agree, you know, if that looks good, go out and shop for it, and then they do, and then it comes back to Eileen for signature. And this is really kind of ensuring us against kind of lumpy procurement where they might find a really good deal on something and it's moving fast and we need to jump on it, which is certainly not the majority of cases, but this is just protecting us against missing out on those deals if we did have to take the extra time to go to the board for it.
Like a couple times a year.
Yeah, it would be on that level. It's not a weekly or monthly kind of occurrence.
Thanks, Richard. Any other questions or comments? Or we will entertain a motion.
Move to approve addendum A proposal.
Motion by Director Jorgensen,
Second.
and second by Vice Chair Bauer. Show of hands vote, all in favor, aye. And it's to be unanimous. All right, thank you, folks. Thank you, Richard. That takes us now into our new business, 7.1, which is a preliminary draft budget. So we will have Eileen and Lori to present on this.
Yeah, and I think I'll do the bulk of presentation and then Lori, feel free to step up and correct me if you need to, and then she'll be available for questions as well. But it was definitely a group effort to prepare this. So. And I will say, we did meet with the finance subcommittee, as mentioned in the staff report. What I'm going to present to you today is slightly different. When we met with the finance subcommittee, we had put pencils down about 30 minutes before the meeting. And we have gotten a little bit more information from the time that we prepared that, and even from the time that the staff report was written. So and I'll specify the changes in what we're asking the board to give input on. So just a little bit of background. As of January of this year, RCA has provided $7.6 million in cumulative ratepayer savings since the time of the launch of the CCE. This budget does reflect a 0.5% retail rate discount for PG&E's generation rates. We are calculating based on the financial model for May 7th. And in this model, and a lot of this was highlighted in the risk meeting or the risk report from last meeting, is that we're expecting a decrease in PG&E generation rates in 2025. We're expecting an increase in the power charging difference adjustment, the PCIA, and an expected increase in the cost of renewable energy credits, carbon-free, and resource adequacy products. Additionally, in 2025, RCA's procurement must accommodate slice of day resource adequacy, which is going to make it even more difficult to procure an already scarce product. And they're expecting those costs to increase, which is slightly the reason why we had the previous agenda item. So with all of this, we are expecting a negative net revenue for next fiscal year. So taking that into account, our draft budget, as far as personnel goes, does maintain all existing staff. It accounts for our increases to the cost of insurance and benefits. We're estimating about a 7% cost in insurance over the next fiscal year. We are proposing freezing 4 positions on the adopted org chart, which includes a finance coordinator, an administrative specialist, a rural run manager, and a rural run specialist. And all 4 of these positions are currently vacant. We accounted for a projected 3-month vacancy in the executive director position, and this is based on feedback that we got from the executive recruitment firm proposals. And then we do request maintaining a vacant analyst position on the org chart. And this position we feel like is needed to help do some very complex data analysis that'll help seek out external funding for customer programs. So I just have the org chart here. This is the most recently adopted org chart with the grayed out. I know that the font is really small, so the grayed out boxes are the positions we're asking to freeze. I'll have a rural rent update later that we're not asking to remove those. We'll come back to the board when we have more information on rural rent to unfreeze those positions with the budget adjustment. So other reductions that we made to try to reduce the dipping into reserves as much as possible is we reduced the overall department request by 2.3 million. We're proposing postponing the architectural design and engineering for the new building. We did receive quotes and we didn't even get to the point of engaging the subcommittee on evaluating because the quotes came in roughly, well, they came in from 1 to almost 3 million just for architectural and engineering design. So we're suggesting pausing that, and when the dust settles, we'll start seeking external funding and potential financing options to move forward on that. So it's a pause, not a stop. We decreased the customer incentive and rebate budget as compared to the adopted budget this fiscal year. I will say historically, our customer incentive and rebates have mostly been funded through external funding sources, and CCE funds have just made up a portion of that. But with the rural RIN delays, this upcoming fiscal year, we were looking at 100% of those programs being funded through CCE revenue. Reduce the communication and outreach budget, and then we postponed the third-party compensation and classification review. And all of these changes we made, we'll seek your input at the end. If there's anything that you want to change in our draft budget, we have time to make those adjustments. So just in comparison to our current year budget, and the numbers on current year are from our mid-year adjustment where we had removed the rural REN funds from the budget, which is a more accurate apples to apples comparison. You can see our electricity sales revenue has a market decrease from our current budget. But we do have an increase in our grants and contracts, and that is from, we have a rural electric vehicle charging network grant, the rural fire station energy resilience grant, and then we have a local government partnership program through PG&E, and that accounts for those funds. I have notes. I make notes and I always forget to look at them. So a comparison on our expenses, our wholesale power expenses are remaining similar to this year. The big difference is the decrease in the revenue there. Another item of note is you'll see the professional and program services increased. I just wanted to point out that 1.2 million of that is passed through grant funds for those grants I just mentioned. And if I am going too fast or you have questions along the way, feel free to stop me. So just here's a visual representation. Most of our money comes from electricity sales. And most of our expenses go to the procurement of power. Our personnel budget is about 7% of our entire budget, and everything else is not mentioned. And this is just a breakdown of expenses by our departments. Power Resources is a lean and mean department, so don't let that big number fool you. That's mostly procurement costs and not staffing costs. But we, have spread out costs amongst our other departments, demand side management, which is our customer programs, our infrastructure planning and transportation and parking lot administration. It's pretty even. So our preliminary bottom line is that we're looking at a negative $5.8 million deficit this current budget year. And, I have our projected net revenue this year at 10 million, but that doesn't reflect actual. That's, from our projections that year. So we didn't want to look at the budget in a vacuum of one fiscal year because, slice of day we think is, it's projected to impact us for the next couple of years. And so we looked out at what the financial model was showing us for the next 2 fiscal years. And so, we're seeing negative net revenues, going out until, 2027. And so, and these estimates here don't account for any changes to RCA's procurement standards. So this is procuring based on RCA's adopted goals. And then I will say the fiscal year 26 and 27 don't incorporate all operating expenses. Those are expenses based on CEA's analysis, which we usually have more, customer program expenses that they don't account for. So I would say that this negative 20 million could be an optimistic estimate. So our board adopted guidelines when we set up the CCE, put our cash reserve target at 35 million. And I will say, what's important to have cash on hand is to weather these years where we have, the market has wide fluctuations and to be able to weather that. And it had a minimum of 10 million under adverse market conditions. And so our current cash on hand is about 21 million. So looking at this, staff, we really wanted to present the board some different options because we don't want to, look into the future of depleting our entire cash reserves in 3 years. So the state just keeps throwing things at us, faster than we can think sometimes. And so just at the end of April, the CPUC issued a decision on provider of last resort. And so the reason I bring this up is this sets up monitoring of CCAs for their viability to reduce the risk of CCAs defaulting and creating, and I'm going to quote the CPUC, a mass involuntary return of customers to the provider of last resort. And so in our case, PG&E would be our customers' provider of last resort if RCA were to default. And so what this is they want to start having more transparency into CCA's financial viability. And the intent is to not have a burden on customers for cost recovery in the event of a CCA closing. Because the IOU, if they had to increase their load unexpectedly for our customers going to them, they would in turn pass that cost on to the customer. So they passed this to promote greater situational awareness on CCAs. And so tier 1 requirements require all CCAs to submit annual financial audits to the CPUC. And we have no problem complying with that. However, if a CCA meets any of these items on this list, you go into tier 2 reporting. And so I just really quick want to go through this list. So if we were to have a credit rating and it was downgraded, that would trigger us being in tier 2. The other is they're looking at days liquidity on hand is less than 45 days. So based on our current expenses, that's about 10 to 12 million cash reserves. And that our debt service coverage, so whatever we have out in loans, our net revenue needs to be 1.0. So we need to at least have a net revenue to cover our debt service. If our cash reserves fall below 5% of annual expenses, and again, based on current expenses, that's about 4 million. And then if we default on contracts or if we become insolvent or file for bankruptcy. So the reason I bring this up is just, we are now having more requirements for days cash on hand. And so this isn't as much as the board adopted policy, but I just, we don't want to get below this. If we do, we have to self-report in 10 days. And then it triggers us having to meet with the energy division once a month to provide in-depth information on our contracts, our hedging, our status of all our contracts, detailed financial information, and then any plans for correction. So, and then of course, as they do, they adopted a penalty structure if you miss any of those deadlines. So if we were to reach this tier 2, it would be a huge administrative burden on RCA. And then in addition, as we mentioned before, for non-compliance, there's some reputational risk to RCA as well. Okay, so with all that said, because of budget shortfalls and the need to have cash on hand, we started discussing with the Energy Authority ways to alter our environmental procurement goals to help weather this downturn in the market. And so just to remind the board adopted in 2019 the goal that RCA would have 100% renewable and carbon-free by 2025. I will say, talking to other CEOs at CCAs and then talking to TEA, they're saying many of their clients right now are going to their boards asking to just pause the very ambitious goals until we see how like the day actually affects the market. So what TA proposed is that if RCA were to align with state procurement goals versus the elevated RCA, we could come out much better financially. So just as an example, for 2024, you see that RCA, so the purple line at the bottom is the state obligation. The line above that is RCA's adopted renewable target, and the line way up that we haven't procured to is our renewable plus carbon-free target. And so a lot of that negative balance is trying to make up that, you know, missing bar there. So I will say in the staff report and then in the finance subcommittee, we proposed these models at pausing this procurement goal for looking at fiscal year. After talking to TA, they procure on a calendar year basis. So one change that I'm presenting to you here versus the staff report is we're asking the board to consider pausing the state or pausing the RCA goals for the remainder of 2024. And I'll just move forward here, and you see 2020. You see 2025, we have a similar scenario. We've already procured to the state standard, and we've actually procured more than the state standard, but we have not met the RCA goals. So we're asking to pause this for the remainder of 2024 and all of calendar year 2025. TEA just can't procure on our fiscal year basis. So I will just point out, if you can see, in 2025, we've already over procured based on the state standard. in the finance subcommittee, we had, they had asked us to propose that as an option of selling off the excess that we don't need. However, after talking to TEA, those kind of procurement decisions all fall within our energy risk policy, and we don't typically come to the board for those types of decisions. So what we do come to the board is what are our procurement goals, and then TEA will evaluate risk, financial viability, and then they'll make those either selling or buying decisions within the energy risk policy. I'm gonna pause for a minute. That was a lot before I move on. Yeah,
So, proposal C, which will be selling some of the yellowish green, is that right?
it would be from the purple dot all the way up to the
Oh,
yellow
including
green.
some of that
Mhm.
bright green, okay. And that's something that, the board, we wouldn't really, I'm just repeating what you said,
Yes,
to see if I
thank you.
understand it.
Yeah.
So that's more of an operations thing that TEA would do.
Yes.
Okay.
This is part of me learning as well.
I mean, ideally, if, we're not really dumping more carbon into the atmosphere, it's just on paper, basically, that, and then we're just protecting ourselves, so, yeah, okay.
Right, yeah.
So if I'm getting this, what TEA said, we really don't need the board's approval, they're already have the authority to sell off if they like.
Yeah, I mean, they do this for us all the time. They, we've entered agreements with other CCAs to help, if they have an excess, they sell it to us. And so yeah, it's kind of already within their authority to operate under the energy risk policy. And yes,
Yeah, just, Lori Biondini, Director of Business Planning and Finance. Just a quick, I guess, maybe say it a different way, is that you all set the procurement goals. And so right now you're seeing the goal that you have, or the board has already set. And then T manages, with staff to procure to that goal. Doesn't mean that you can't change the goal, I guess, so we had the discussion in the subcommittee meeting about, what it would look like to get down to that purple line. And it might mean selling some, length. So you could set the goal at the purple line. You could also set the goal somewhere in between, the purple line and the current, light blue line. But then T would manage to that goal.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
How much are we really saving every year if we go down to the, just the state target?
Because we've already procured, so we'd be saving about 4 million in procurement costs. And then, if we were to sell the length, it's about another 3.8 million. So, so just looking at, the difference. So the net position with the change in the procurement goal, as we would go from a negative 5.8 million to being able to put 3.4 million in reserves. And I did this going out to 2027. We start to go negative again, but much smaller, like in the first year is like 600,000 negative versus 7 million. And but I guess I said it in the staff report, and I'll say this verbally too. We recognize that these projections change every time we present them to you. And we recognize that this time of year is, it's a little speculative on what the rates are actually going to be in January. And so we see this as a first lever of pausing to see how the markets play out and planning on reevaluating this with the board in 6 months to see once we have more solid numbers on PG&E's rates.
I mean, who is this all, how is CNG playing into all this? He's still part of our portfolio, we're not selling that, right?
No, yeah. Sandrini helps us quite a bit.
But you're doing this with the assumption that, we're not using Sandry, is that correct?
So this has Sandrini online, in, I think May 7th had Sandrini coming online October
October.
2024. And I will say, I think I can say this, that 20% of the panels were delivered this week,
22%.
22%. So that number is,
For celebration,
Yeah.
yeah.
So-
2%.
yeah. So next,
Take it.
next board meeting, we're all going to Kern County and we're installing.
That's great. First of sunscreen, yeah.
I'm not sure the following, you said.
Oh, no, she's saying that she was joking. We're gonna go down in several panels.
Oh, I.
Make sure it's online by October, yeah.
Do they have the panel?
22%.
Is there,
22% of the panels if they need to. It's on the word or the other.
They had to do the reorder, so they're being, made and shipping, so. But we finally got some on the ground.
We just met with them today to get an update and they are supposed
So
to have
who's-
them all delivered by late June or early July.
Who's making it? I don't know if I have to.
Yeah, we-
That's,
Yeah,
In China, is that?
Not, it doesn't violate the federal requirement.
yeah,
that's all we can say.
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't violate the federal trade, requirement, but we can't say who's making them. But they'll all be delivered by,
Can't be said, I'm just being.
It is proprietary business information, it's market sensitive, so because they have negotiated a certain price package with a particular manufacturer and distributor, and to the extent we know it, if we disclose it, we would be, number one, potentially polluting, and then number two, we would be disclosing what we've committed to protect as confidential business information, and it's a legitimate protection under the Public Records Act. It's not a sort of fabricated convenience. I know it's taken me a long time to get comfortable.
Well, I've never got a copy of it.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
We as a board, we don't know what we paid. We get it one time, we don't anymore. We don't know what we paid for the power. We don't know what we sell the power for. If we read these agreements, there are pages of the critical information is redacted, like the whole page, there's the word "and" in that we can read. Other ones are just completely redacted. And so we as a board sit here and make these decisions, and I guess we're responsible for them. I don't know if you can come and test my house or not, but good luck. So we're making these decisions, and yet we really don't know what we're taking. I'm not defaulting or defaming anybody when I say this, but we're just taking the word of ambiguous people, essentially, telling us that this stuff is all good. And up to date, there's a lot more red on there than this thing. As we listen to each of these risk management reports, there was a whole lot more green as this thing started out, and somewhere along the line between the state of California and the Pacific PG&E company, we get a lot more red out of it. And so I'm concerned for the viability of our CEO as this continues on. Does PG&E have a picture of how they're gonna, energy's already gone down. And so we have to follow our price down and sell our price for less after what we put credit for, if I'm not mistaken now. And so as PG&E does whatever it is they do, the end of the day, the PG&E bill goes up, but not in the generation department, but in the distribution, but they're making more money and we're making less. And something just doesn't pan out to me that's right. Not what I read.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if that's the necessarily debate for this discussion, but I mean, yeah, I think we've talked about it a lot, that is capitalism right there. PG&E is a corporation that wants to pay out to their shareholders, and we don't. So, that's just in competition really at the end of the day, but.
I always, even from the get-go, I always thought that this was a little bit of a David and Goliath kind of thing. It's always been like that, even from the beginning. So, yeah. I get you, Frank, going. Well, the question I had though was, so it looks like there's 4 things that make our expenses go up. 4 major things. The PCIA, which we always hear about, the increase in the renewable energy, the RECs, and then this, what do you call it, slice of day? Alright. So of those, which are the ones that are like the most like volatile or the most uncertain?
I think the biggest impact to this right now is slice of day. Because RA was already very expensive and now we're having to procure it for every hour of the day. And the decision that just came out on this is we now have to over procure by 17%. And so it just makes it really, there's not a lot of it and everyone has to get it. And so it just drives the price up. And so, you know, to Frank's point that we're following PG&E's rates, and I think what we're asking right now is a fairly, you know, the first lever of like, okay, let's relook at our environmental procurement goals to not go in the red. But I think as a bigger conversation that we'll be bringing back to the board is just, you know, do we need to move to a cost of service model where we're not constantly being driven up and down by PG&E's rates, and we can still monitor PG&E's rates and strive to be below them, but we've been having conversations with a lot of other CCAs and they're really you know, starting to look at this cost of service model and kind of unhitching the wagon to the IOU. I think the quote I heard was like, don't let them, you know, drag you off a cliff. And so, you know, this conversation after this budget meeting I feel like this is just a conversation starter for the board, and we'll be exploring as staff of ways to ensure the viability of RCA in the future.
And the slice of day ruling that was from the CPUC.
Yeah.
Our friend.
That's a common theory.
And didn't we also hear that, the penalties for not procuring to the slice of day requirements are gonna be less than the procurement?
They have been. We've been, you know, well, even now for the penalties for not procuring resource adequacy are less than what it would cost to procure it. They may calculate those penalties, but
And they might get voted out of office too.
And their appointments.
Right. Well, the appointer make it voted. I mean, it seems like this is not a sustainable trajectory. Maybe I'm deluded, but this doesn't seem sustainable, so it seems like at some point. Something's gonna give there, and we're gonna have a correction. And until then.
and that's what we hope. I mean, we hope they see that the errors of their ways and but we have to plan with the information that we have now.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Skip and Frank and I talk a lot about, it hurts to want to bring our, you know, our target down to the state level. Because that's why our CEA was kind of formed, right? It's to be better than the state, and our community kind of wants that, or does want that. But, you know, at this point, do we have a choice, you know, given CPUC April 22nd nonsense and the slice of day and all these things? It's like, well, you know, hope for better weather, you know, and a couple of years of being at that state level will get us through, and St. Jean will come online and all these other plans we have. But you wanna survive. You know?
I was gonna say, like, I've been dealing with some weird local economic conditions for a while. And, you know, I like the approach, that, you know, you're still being austere, you're freezing some of the expense side of the ledger. But, look, with all the uncertainty, I mean, if I were in your position, I'd be wanting to try to protect the cash to see how it goes. And one way we'll never reach that goal is if we're in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Right, so it's be conservative on the front end and act quickly, and then understand the playing field as we move forward, and you can always ramp it back up.
Yeah.
But for now, protect the cash, so that you make it. And one thing that won't be popular is if you're, you know, if you're continuing to, on the budget side, continuing to spend more.
Yeah.
That won't be popular, but I think there's a good argument to the public to be able to make it.
Well, I do have some good news too.
Yeah.
So let me, and then we can, discuss more.
Yeah, go ahead, because that's gonna be kind of the main point of discussion, I think, just based off the staff report and stuff, so we can come back to talking about
Yeah.
meeting those targets and stuff, but let's, and then finish up the slides here.
So just our cash on hand, and we have come a long way in the last couple of years, and to Director Ramos's point, we don't want to get back to that position we were in, where we were hitting that zero line, and we had to get to loans to be able to, maintain operations. And so we are trying to be fiscally conservative, and take an approach of, let's see what shakes out in 6 months, and then come back to the board and whether or not we can take stronger action, or we can, release some of the takebacks. And if this chart here is based on board adopted goals, so if we temporarily adopted the state targets, this drop off would not be as significant. Okay, so RCA is been actively seeking out external fundings for our customer programs. And so, just a summary of some of the grant funding pursuits. Our DSM team has been looking at applying for Department of Energy Renew America schools, which is energy improvements for local schools. We have 22 schools that are interested in partnering with our CEA. This could bring between 8 and 15 million over a few years to develop energy improvement projects at schools. We've partnered with 4 tribal nations on the Department of Energy Terrace grant. If we are applying for a PG&E Resilience Hub grant, it's $100,000 towards a resilience hub, and it's slated for potentially for Food for People. And then our rural energy network project, we're seeing this more and more with the state grants, is that we propose a budget, and then the delay between getting funds, all the costs have gone up. And so we have a quite significant gap in funding for this project. And so our staff are working diligently to find outside funds to cover that gap, so that we can make this project successful and meet the targets that we stated. We're also redesigning it to do it in phases and do smaller projects, and so that we're at least getting a lot of the work done while we're trying to find outside funding. And then with that, I'm going to ask Director Coleman to come up to give the really good news, because I put slides, but he can say whatever he wants.
I know, and, thank you.
Well, I just wanna say, I put rural rent implications, but I didn't change it because this was like kind of a sad slide, and then I got to make it a happy slide.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Stephen Coleman, I'm the Director of Demand Side Management, and yeah, I'm not sure how I got so lucky in this report to get to deliver this news, while everyone else got to deliver all of the challenges, but I'll try and give a really brief recap. About a year ago, just about a year ago, I think I was here announcing that there was a proposed decision to fund our rural energy network, which was a group of 7 partners operating across 61 California counties to implement energy efficiency programs with a significant budget, a 4-year budget of $70-some million, $72 million at that time. And then, as everyone remembers, once the money comes, the issues come, and so we quickly ended up in some governance disputes, which resulted in some filings to the CPUC of competing petitions for modification, and the partners just not really seeing eye to eye on a way path forward. And so we had proposed to reduce the size and scope of the REN to something more manageable to the northern state that would include ourselves, Lake and Mendocino counties, and much of the Sierra Nevada region. And so this is through a lot of work by staff. I can't say enough about like what a group effort this has been, of replying to comments and making comments and having ex parte meetings, and the work that Nancy has done on the legal front has just been completely grueling, but top-notch work, because just this Tuesday, there's an administrative law judge ruling that was granting a proposed decision to create a split of rural REN. So it would form 2 separate RENs, a northern rural REN and a central rural REN. Ourselves being the administrator of the northern rural REN, which would include ourselves, Humboldt, Mendocino, and Sierra Business Council, and the Sierra Nevada we had proposed. And Lake, thank you. I wouldn't want to leave out Lake. And like I said, this just dropped on Tuesday, so we've been scrambling, like looking at all the implications. Interestingly enough, the budget that was proposed by the ALJ is slightly more than the budget that we had requested for our split, so that was nice. Other than that, they cut out a large chunk of the 2024 funds because they weren't doing anything in 2024, right? So this is the total budget. So these are calendar years, not fiscal year. They anticipate in the CPUC's own estimation that there wouldn't be a final decision until September, and so that $2.3 million would essentially be covering the last 3 months of 2024, and then a little over $10 million in the subsequent years of 2025 through 2027. There would be an administrative portion of that, approximately 10%, as well as the 3% marketing portion of that, which RCA would probably hold the bulk of that to perform the administrative functions. And then the rest of it would be going towards customer programs in the entire region. So a lot of this, unfortunately, that full $10.3 million will not be coming into RCA, but that will be going out to serve customers in all of the regions. So we're entering a comment period now. Initial comments are due June 14th. Then there'll be reply comments and a whole series of things. We don't know for sure how our friends in the central regions might be taking this and replying. We've heard potentially good news that they're in favor of this too, because I think they were looking at the option of being completely defunded. So this could be a win-win as far as they're concerned as well. And so this will have a very significant impact on our ability to run customer programs and continue to fund that thing. It's amazing that it's been a full year that we've been without this external source of funding for all of our customer programs. And again, really happy with it. Be able to report this, with all the work that, everyone, on staff, people here and people, back at the office that have done to really work hard to do this. We've already met virtually with our partners in Sierra Nevada and Lake and Mendocino counties, and are planning to meet with them in person next week to start the ball rolling. They're all very excited to be partnered with us and to be working on this.
What type of programs can we offer our community with this type of funding?
Okay, so the original 7 programs were resource programs, which were basic incentives for commercial and residential customers. And then also some educational programs and assessments for residential customers. There was also going to be codes and standards program to help contractors and building departments meet energy codes and learn about energy codes, workforce development, a financing program, which is very exciting because financing, we've learned, is one of the big barriers towards getting especially larger projects. And I wasn't counting on there. There's also a public equity program, which would only be implemented in the regions that don't currently have that LGP, local government partnership with PG&E that Eileen had mentioned before. There'd be a whole series of programs that would be phased in over the next few years, so they're not all going to drop day one.
And so we'll bring back, we've learned our lesson. We're not gonna count our chickens till they hatch. So we'll bring back a budget adjustment when we have a decision.
And that probably won't be until late summer.
Yeah, we're anticipating September. Hopefully having a little better idea of which direction it's going by the nature of comments that we get to the decision, but this is a very positive outcome to a very long ordeal.
Great news.
Yeah, everyone who worked so hard on it. Thank you for letting me deliver the good news. That was very great.
I want this chicken to be like 2 years old.
Right. So just to wrap it up, our timeline, we're presenting the draft budget to you today. We can meet again with the finance subcommittee if there's need for additional review or input. And then we'll bring the final budget to you at the June board meeting. And so what we're asking from the board is we're recommending preparing a budget based on the state renewable portfolio standards. So we're asking for your input. If the board agrees, we would bring back an agenda item at the June meeting that would pause RCA's renewable and carbon-free procurement for the remainder of calendar year 2024 and all of 2025. And then just any input that you have on any of the other revenue or expense line items that you would, like to see changed in the budget that's brought back in June.
Thank you, Eileen. I want to open it up first before we go to questions, just to anybody from the finance subcommittee that would like to maybe just speak to your guys' discussion surrounding those procurement goals and just how you guys came to your decision and thoughts on that recommendation.
Yeah. Well, you have anything to say, Skip?
I don't. I think Eileen has reviewed what we talked about, and we do want to be more conservative for a long haul of RCEA.
You probably say that in my world, but I'm just, along the line with Skip, and most of you, I don't know, most of you do or not, but know how I feel on some of this stuff with the procurement situation. We would be very foolish to pursue this. And I'm probably gonna use this word wrong, but that's what I best know how to describe it. This this mythical procurement of these green, these green energy. The energy that you're gonna put, the amount of carbon that you're gonna put into your community in Humboldt County won't change if this place dies, goes on or not. The energy that will come into Humboldt County will remain the same, regardless of what this board does. The energy that we buy, and particularly in the renewable areas, are not in Humboldt County. They're either water, or they're solar, or they're wind. None of which, other than some limited amount of solar and how many megawatts you got up at roof. And so isn't gonna change it. So for us to not take advantage of doing the same thing the rest of this country is doing by taking the paper RA and the paper renewables and manipulating those to their own benefit, that's what we should do as a board. Otherwise, if somebody quoted earlier that bankruptcy, you don't really do real good after you go bankrupt. And so hopefully some things can change in the price of energy. I'm not sure how that's gonna work, but to not pursue that advantage at this point would be foolish. So I'm for using just going by the state guidelines and selling off what we have to do to do it. We can always buy more of it. I wouldn't want to give up our right to the power that we have contracted with. Use it to our best advantage.
Scott, anything to add? And then I know Natalie had a question.
I'm reluctantly for changing our standards because I think, I mean, it's out of our control. It really is, and I wish our representatives in state government and federal government would do a better job of not only making it easier for us to get carbon-free energy, but to rein in the IOUs for their, it's feel like it's Enron all over again between RA costs and I'm frustrated, but, you know, I plan on talking to our senator and our senator and be like, how bring these guys in, change the CPUC so it's not 5 appointed governor appointees, because how do we survive and thrive when it seems like you know, the IOUs have all the tricks in their, you know, in their bag and we don't have any. So we gotta survive. I feel like it'll get better in the future. And I really hope it does, but you know, we all agreed that we gotta do something different for the time being.
Also,
Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I was struggling to wrap my head around it. I think maybe all of us are, those on my finance committee had a little more time to think about it. So that dark green versus light green, like, you know, the carbon free, like those are all part of our portfolio. And we wanna have the opportunity to sell off part of it. Why are, I get that they're like all electrons we have procured, but are we selling off the ones that help us get closer to our goal because they're higher value essentially? Like is it like, are we able to sell at a higher rate something that we've procured in some different way? Or is it, do you understand what I'm saying here? Like, can we keep the greener stuff and just make it a little better as far as like what I mean, I get that it's all like procured through this like smorgasbord of contracts. So I guess I'm just wondering what part of it we're quote selling.
Yeah, it's based on the attributes.
Okay.
And so I think of it as like a table with attributes on one side and then like a plus or negative number along the axis by month. And you're plus 5 or negative 10. And if we're negative 10, based on what the board sets as its goal, then TEA has to go fill that -10. And if we're +5, whatever, then if someone wants it, they could sell it at whatever the market rate is for that attribute. And so that's kind of so it really is just a table that we get, and it's like red or green. And in most of our months, and we're looking good. Summer months, not so much. Everybody's trying to buy for, July through October, and it's more expensive. And so it's just in those months where we're like, the number's 20, and there's a buyer, they'll sell it. And then we get that revenue, and that offsets the cost that we're gonna have to buy for July. So it's just them managing that. It isn't like we're selling a piece of Sandrini, or we're selling, it's like a number and a spreadsheet.
Yeah. It's very hard for me to wrap my head around, how this influences. I think what our community wants from us is for us to influence the energy development sector to be more sustainable and to maintain sustainability longer term. And I think that is a worthy cause. Obviously, I hope we all do, or we wouldn't be here. But what that means in this type of scenario is really not clear to me. I understand what it means budgetarily, but as far as that other community obligation, I'm a little bit at a loss.
Yeah, and I mean, the way I think about it is, if, we have a hiccup here where we're not meeting the board goals, but these CCAs that came online and set these goals that were much higher than the state standards, those are these big renewable projects that are getting done. Like we're moving the needle as a group of CCAs for these renewable projects, because most of them have set standards higher than state standards. And then I think maintaining viability, as we build reserves, we're able to be, a developer in our own backyard, and we want to access IRA funds to own projects so that we are more hedged for this. And, we're looking at all different ways to really make sure that we aren't on this roller coaster, but it's just, it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, and then I missed it if you talked about the CAC's input on this. Have we done that?
No.
Okay. Is that something that we typically do?
We haven't for the budget, no. And, part of it's timing. They meet every other month, and, we try to get the closest financial model, and then be able to budget around it. And it doesn't leave a whole lot of time for public engagement.
Yeah.
Okay, can I ask a question about, because I'm just kind of looking at these proposals from the finance subcommittee, and so looking, at that proposal B of just meeting to the state and then checking back in 6 months versus meeting to the state and then selling off, some of our what we've procured. And so I just, what is the rationale about not selling it off? And so I guess, because then I guess we still have it. So if we want to go back to those targets and things are looking good, why wouldn't we sell it off is my question. Because that seems like if we're just gonna procure to that, then we might as well get the extra benefit of selling it too.
And that's where I am changing the request of the board. And I'm only asking the board to advise staff on those standards, and then TEA will manage our portfolio based on our renewable portfolio standard.
Okay.
And I'm not asking the board for input on selling, because that's all handled within the energy risk policy of how they manage our portfolio to those standards.
So it could then potentially be either a deficit of 1.5 million, or we could make up to 3.5 like it will fall somewhere between those two numbers
It's
then?
more likely to be, the positive 3.4.
Yeah, okay.
As a question, just clarification, once the clock passes now, you can't go back and you can't bank up your portfolio. I mean, you can't, with this type of energy, you use it today and tomorrow you can't sell it yesterday. Is that correct?
So our compliance period is over 4 years. But again, that's state compliance, which we're gonna meet, and so. We do kind of look back for state compliance, and December is gonna be the end of our current compliance period. And January 1, 2025 is gonna reset our compliance period for another 4 years. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I don't think you did. I mean,
Sorry.
that's for compliance, but if we have CCA over on the back side of the street wants to buy, we've got some extra megawatts, and they want to buy them. How long can we hold on to those megawatts and be able to sell them to somebody down the road versus the time that we have them?
And they be stored.
I mean, can they be stored like a battery or there's, my understanding of megawatts are in the lines, are in the lines, if you don't use them at that moment, now somebody gets them. But, after tomorrow, today's megawatts are gone.
Yeah, and we're purchasing on, like a monthly basis right now, right, Richard? So,
Do you want me to chime in on that
yeah,
one?
please.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here are actually renewable energy certificates, and one certificate is equivalent to 1 megawatt hour.
So you're talking about certificates, not more than the.
Yes, the energy is a commodity we buy separately from the renewable energy certificates, although sometimes, we enter into contracts like the one for the social biomass has the renewable energy certificates and the resource adequacy and the megawatt hours all bundled together. But regarding the renewable energy certificates, which is what you're really making the decision on today, it depends, they come in different varieties. So we've talked before about there's these product categories 1, 2, and 3. And the ones that are category 1, those you basically have to buy the energy and the renewable energy certificate need to be transacted together at the same time. Whereas there's more flexibility with the product category 3. We're not even thinking about the 2 right now. Those have become kind of undesirable for reasons that we won't go into. But so we basically are choosing between 1 and 3, and we're just right now preparing to go into the deal to buy the product category 3 RECs, which the board has previously approved, and that's in itself a money saving measure that we haven't talked about in this meeting today. But with those, there's a lot more flexibility because the certificates are detached from the actual sale of the energy. So you can move around more in time as far as like buying them when you want to and choosing what vintage, i.e. like when the energy was actually generated doesn't matter quite as much in terms of what year you apply them to your compliance needs.
So that's the ones that we're talking about TEA managing in the portfolio and picking when's the best time to sell them and not sell.
Yeah, but what we're mainly going to be doing here is directing them on the PCC 1. Those more expensive ones, because there's a lot more money for us to be realized in reducing our procurement of those, replacing some of it with the less expensive PCC 3. But there's a ceiling on how much of our state compliance we can do with those PCC 3s, so we can't really go big on those. But to the extent we can, we're going to buy some of those, and that's going to help us out financially while still, helping us meet part of the state compliance. And it's also not going to the PCC 3 ones. Another difference with those is they don't show up in the pie chart. That's our actual, green energy that we've procured, whereas the PCC 1 does show up in the pie chart as part of our procurement of green energy that people see when they're comparing us against the state or against PG&E.
Oh, one more violin. It was just, I guess, when we're talking about, why the CCAs, why we wanted to have these aggressive portfolios,
it was because we actually created that demand.
Right.
So that's how we really moved the needle in a real way, not just in a paper electrons, PPA way. Yeah.
And then I feel the other CCAs are gonna be in the same boat that we are, and they will be wanting to sell what they have, and then market's gonna actually drop the certificates.
That's something we brought up, I mean, we don't know that for sure, but that's a consideration that, you know.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
Other questions, thoughts on the direction that we need to give or any of the proposals from the finance subcommittee?
Well, I do have a question. I mean, if we walk back our standards essentially, and things change dramatically, I mean, could it be with the, provision that we'd like to come back and reassert our goals as soon as possible? I mean, it's, if we don't have to do that all year, that would be ideal, or, you know, for the, I don't know, you know, if there's any nuance to add to the language here.
Yeah, so we do intend to look at this with the board in 6 months. I will say because TEA trades for the whole calendar year, it's really difficult to roll it back, but it isn't, I'm not saying we won't look at it.
Okay. I appreciate that.
But I think the goal, right, is to try and get to 35 billion. See if like prices dramatically change. Still want to achieve that before we do any like flexing back to our original goal. You know,
I thought the 35 million reserves was also like, we were, well, I guess that's the reservable period, but I also thought it was like, we're not gonna talk about like rate reductions for people or discounts, I guess you could say, until we get there, but I guess it's both.
I what do you think?
I think, you know, the 35 million is something we want to achieve and maintain. I don't think that we are looking at this dependent on the 35 million. I think, you know, I'm putting this conversation in context of not being at the 35 million and the potential of dropping significantly below it. So we'll bring it back no matter what, and it will be the board's decision, you know, and we'll always, you know, present what the cash on hand is at that time.
Well, and just some of those numbers that you shared too about like, those new compliance rules from the CPUC too, that like, we need to, you know, have at least a fairly significant amount of reserves, obviously not 35 million, you know, as required by that, but to be in a comfortable position to even be operating. And so I think, you know, that plays into it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, one last thing for proposal B. The intent there, the discussion was holding on to the RA because of how wildly it fluctuates, and was it 3 times more than it was 2 years ago or something? The thought was, well, if we sell it, try and get it back, and it's 6 times more, and never get it back for, you know, I think that was why we thought of that other proposal. It's like, sell it for maybe you don't get back for even close to what you bought it for. I don't know, that was kind of a
But
thought.
to Jack's point of like, if that bottom drops out,
Yeah.
then, and we didn't sell it, then it's not worth anything.
But Richard, are we seeing a trend
Yeah.
decrease in the generation costs? In the last 5 years, are we seeing a decrease in generation costs going into the future? Or are you seeing an increase?
The energy itself?
Yeah, the generation energy costs.
Yeah, well, energy costs went up pretty wildly for a while. They've calmed down a lot and come back down just in the last few months. So that's kind of the one piece of good news on the power procurement side is that that's the part that's looking better in our financial model, while resource adequacy and renewable energy certificates have gone up just in the last couple of months. And I think it was very recently we were telling you energy was going up more than the other thing, which it was, but it's reversed.
Right. Are you seeing more like solar and storage online, other CCAs, which is taking away from that demand?
I think that's helping. Part of it is just the good luck of having 2 good hydro years in a row in California has helped. And then also, natural gas, is a really big factor in it. Because, if they, like, we just had a risk presentation, from the TEA, and they're showing us these graphs of how much natural gas is in storage in all the different places it can be stored around the West. And it's just like the water reservoirs are full in California, the natural gas storage is also really full. Just, production's been high, demand has been kind of moderate. So those are 2 important places where we're in really good shape right now.
So what additional direction do you need from us? Do you need a motion?
I think there's not an action, it's just provide guidance. So I think, if we have a consensus to move forward with preparing the budget based on state renewable portfolio standards, and then we'll bring back these items in June for.
How many people are in favor of it? That sounds, yeah, I mean, you can straw poll that sounds good to me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think you said, like, the favor doesn't feel good, but it kind of seems, I mean, financially, this is kind of the responsibility that we have to do that. Okay. Any last minute comments or thoughts or questions before we move forward? Yeah, go ahead now.
Was there no public comment?
Oh, yeah, we did not take public comment. I don't know if it's still online. Do we have anybody online?
If I can just make one more quick comment, I think from staff's perspective, where you're going with this, it looks really good. Because I did hear one comment from the director, to the effect that this is really just something that's happening on paper. And I don't want to take too lightly, that we are really turning down our green goals. Now, I do think globally, it doesn't mean more carbon is going to be spewed into the atmosphere, and that's good because somebody else will buy these renewable energy certificates that we ought not to take. But the downside for our CEA will be that our power content labels will look less favorable for a couple of years to come, and we do always think about, the opt-out risk among the people who are most advocating for us to have a green portfolio as being an important underlying reason for what we do. So I just wanted to make sure that that's recognized in the conversation, but I do think what we're doing is a necessary step aside of that.
Thank you. Do you have any comments online? Okay. So no public comments. Any final thoughts before we move on? Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Lori. Thank you all staff who helped prepare everything. We appreciate it. It was very informational. All right, so that'll take us to 7.2, which is our executive director recruitment firm selection. And can we have staff report, please?
Okay. Hi, I'm Christy, the HR manager. I have hopefully good news. Our executive director recruitment is chugging along just great, and we're hoping tonight to have the board choose for us to get started an executive recruitment agency. So we solicited quotes from a large number of agencies and received 6 of them back. Eileen and I scored them and then compared those scores and found that our top 3 were unanimous. And I went ahead and checked the references that were provided for the top 3. And as references tend to be, they were glowing for all of the agencies. But ultimately, Eileen and I believe that the quote in the agency of Trepepi Smith is going to be the best fit for this recruitment for you. They have knowledge of the CCA space. They are strong in the public sector recruitment specifically. And their quote, if you were able to review it, is very robust, and they're going to do a lot to support you in this search. We also had the opportunity to meet with the team
And they are so impressive and so amazing, and I'm already slowing them down, and it's only been 48 hours since we talked to them. So we have, some of their representatives online today to say hello to you and answer any of your specific questions. And we're hopeful that, you will believe that this is a good fit as well going forward. Part of what they're going to do for us is not only speak to, the staff and the department directors to get an idea of who the best fit is, for this organization, but they would like your input too. And so we're hoping, that the subcommittee is willing to stick with us. And that the board is happy to have them speak on, the full board's behalf, to get some of those items across, work on interview questions and potentially sit on some, initial interviews. So I'll go ahead and let Peppy Smith say hello. We have joining us today, Catherine, Christine, and Kylie. Potentially, I don't see Karen. Do I see Karen? And Karen. Won't you say hello? Hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us this evening. We're excited to be here.
I guess I'll go next. Hi, I'm Christine Martin, and I'm a director with Peppy Smith. I'll be the lead recruiter for this position, and we're very excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Catherine Griffiths, and I'm a principal at Peppy Smith. Our team has been working with CCAs for more than 5 years now, and we are so grateful for the opportunity to get to know Redwood Coast better.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Villaseñor. I work directly with several of our CCA clients and am a lead with our team in the space for Peppy Smith, and we're all excited to be working with you.
Thank you. If you guys are comfortable kind of just jumping in, it would be really nice, I think, for us if you just wanted to give us a brief overview of what your process normally looks like and what we can maybe expect from working with a firm like you guys.
Of course. So, as mentioned before, just to give a little bit of overview, our firm has filled over 26 executive level positions in the past 4 years. And then on top of that, outside of our recruitment experience, we also work with 9 different CCAs across California. So we're very familiar with the space. We have extensive roots in California local government as well through our partnerships with the largest local government associations in California, like MMANC, League of California Cities, California Special District Associations, just to name a few. And we also work with over 200 local government agencies. So with that, we have a vast network of professionals to tap into. And to answer your question about our process, so the first step in the process is developing a candidate profile. So we gather input from the board. I believe we're meeting with the department directors, and we're sending out a survey to staff to really gather input on what you're looking for, and to see if you have any ideas of the next executive director you're looking for. And then from there, we develop a candidate profile and we start building out marketing materials. So we'll create a 4 to 5 page digital recruitment brochure to push out. We publish the job to multiple job boards. And then we also gather social media content and push out social media content to further our reach. And then from there, the recruitment is open for about 3 weeks. We take all of the applicant materials, review them, and then we'll compile a list of all of the applicants, their resumes, and their cover letters. We'll come back with summaries of why we believe they'd be a great fit for our CEA. And then we come back to you with recommendations on who we'd recommend you interview. But of course, we'll provide all of the applicant materials in case there's someone that we missed or someone you'd like to interview as well. And then from there, we help with everything else. So scheduling the interviews, we can come to our CEA and be part of the interviews, whatever support is needed there. And then we also help with notification. So we're constantly keeping all applicants and candidates in the loop. And then we're also available to help with negotiation. So with all of that, I hope that answers the question about process.
Great, thank you. That was awesome. Do we have any other questions from the board or comments that we'd like to ask them while they're here online with us? Okay, not seeing anything. So Eileen, what else do you guys need from us? Obviously, a motion here and some other stuff, but if there's no other discussion, we can.
Yeah, and we are asking, not only to authorize, entering into a contract with Trippetti Smith, but also authorizing the ad hoc subcommittee to work with them on behalf of the board. And the language is fairly open-ended, but what we're specifically looking for is assistance with identifying the knowledge, skills, and abilities that the board is looking for, reviewing interview questions, and then potentially doing a first round of interview before taking the top candidates to the full board. So making sure that the board is comfortable with having the ad hoc subcommittee act in that way. And then because, and I know this is a lot to ask of you on the spot, but if there's anything that a board member would like to add to making sure it gets included in the knowledge, skills, and abilities now, that the ad hoc subcommittee can make sure to communicate to the recruitment firm.
Great, thank you, Eileen. So yeah, if there is anything on that topic of just specific, either things that you want the ad hoc subcommittee to take into consideration, or specific qualities or things that are on your mind right now, now is the time. If anybody has anything they want to add?
Well, can we remind her, I'm on the ad hoc
Mhm.
rules,
Yes.
on the ad hoc, just so we all know who we're talking about.
So
Things about-
Scott kind of.
Just remind her.
Well, but I wanted, it's good, you don't have to be, so, you didn't raise your hand, so.
Yeah.
Scott is not.
Okay.
I thought it was an alternate.
There you go. Okay.
So one thing I think would be helpful would be if this board determines what type of review you would like the subcommittee to do. Do you want the subcommittee to call applications and bring back a few? Do you want them to do preliminary interviews and then bring back a short list? Do you want them? Anyway, I think the board should provide that level of direction to the subcommittee.
And well, so what I could just maybe suggest, because like we're literally doing this right now at the city of Arcata, we're doing city manager. So what we did is we kind of like created a subcommittee, and but all of us, the whole council, got to review the resumes and kind of give their feedback to, maybe we could do that to Eileen, of just like particular ones that really stood out that we'd want to maybe see interviewed in a preliminary interview, and then taking both that feedback from board members and from the recruiting firm of kind of those top candidates, that maybe the ad hoc subcommittee could interview, and then come to a decision of which ones to break down to then go to, what would be kind of a final round of interviews with, 2, 3, probably not more than like 3 candidates to then, interview with directors, interview with the whole board. We are also doing a community panel, or so maybe interview with some members of the CAC could be an option as well. So that's kind of what I would throw out there as a possible process if folks are comfortable with that. Because again, it's hard to get, I think, all of us together to do multiple interviews. And even might be challenging to get that subcommittee together to do multiple interviews, so.
And I will say the preliminary thought, and it can change, is that Trippetti Smith would do that first round and bring forward, their top candidates. And as they mentioned, they would allow the board to review all the resumes. I was anticipating that the full board might not want to review all the resumes, but I could be wrong and have the ad hoc subcommittee do that. And then those recommendations would get narrowed down by the ad hoc subcommittee, and then we would engage with the full board. But I think the first item you for the city of Arcata recruitment, you're having the full board look at all the resumes for the OD.
Yeah, and that's only 5 of us compared to like 10 to 12, yeah, however many it is now, but, so.
I was picturing a process similar to what Eileen described, so being on the subcommittee, I would say like, you know, as, going through and doing kind of an initial kind of evaluation to make sure, you know, these are folks that meet the criteria that we've laid out, et cetera. Then, you know, then the subcommittee and then the full board having an opportunity. Now, what that opportunity looks like, I mean, I've just in my experience that has varied where, you know, in past recruitments for senior leadership, that has looked like having a meet and greet where people can come and meet with the board as well as, you know, community members who want to talk with them, that I think can have some benefits, and it can also be kind of hard to gauge, in addition to the, you know, to interviews, but getting that sense to chat with them.
And so is Peppy Smith gonna rank all of, they're gonna qualify and rank all the applicants
Yeah.
first?
I will say that was one of the things that elevated their service for us, is recognizing how large our board is and that how busy our board is. We felt like that was an important service to have.
And so do we have any idea how many applicants we might expect to get? That's how many, you know, can anybody answer that? Are we looking at 5, 10, 20, 30, 50? I mean, there's yeah, okay, yeah. Because it just, I mean, you know, you get an email after work on a Thursday and you're like, hey, we need to do this in the subcommittee, and you're like, oh, sure we do, good night. You know, I mean, sometimes it's hours and hours of work and we do, and it just isn't feasible. I mean, I wanna, you know, and I feel like sometimes when those kind of questions come up, I'm just like, yeah, I'm at the end of my rope, I can't do it. But I don't want it to fall through the cracks because I don't have the time right then.
Do you want to lean on your alternate? Do you want your alternate to replace you?
It's not a lot of work. It's not a lean on the alternate issue, it's
Yeah.
we're hiring a company to do a job for us, and how much of that job are they doing, and at what point is that decision coming to us?
Yeah, I
think,
think
yeah.
it's trusting in them to do the preliminary review, and. I mean, I imagine you can get a substantial amount that you have to filter through too, to say, yeah, these are the top, you know, 5, 6 people that you should really look at. And I think that, you know, is the service, and then to help facilitate interview questions, what that interview looks like, et cetera. So, I mean, I think being able to lean on the firm, especially do that preliminary review, you know, that's what I was imagining, and I think maybe I didn't say that clearly, like, they would do that preliminary review, and then we would look at all of those resumes, like, when we did city manager, like, that was like 10 resumes, that was like the first,
Yeah.
you know, shuffle through, and so.
Yeah, they'll narrow it
Yeah.
down.
I'd also be interested as the ad hoc in defining, you know, what are those qualities, like we talked about, like what are those qualities we want, was that experience that we, you know, really see as essential, and then developing a process that helps us evaluate that. Like, you know, I'll just say for me, some of those characteristics are personal qualities, you know, like relatability, and, you know, some of these kind of hard to gauge through paper attributes. And so, you know, I imagine that we will have guidance and input on how best to evaluate those personal characteristics in addition to professional experience. So those are the kinds of things that I would love help on from this team here.
And I do think the full board should weigh in on that in closed session.
Yeah. And maybe even so, I mean, is it a possibility, for, you know, because again, it's hard to get us all together at the same time to have, you know, individuals on the board that are interested to be able to have a conversation with some of these recruiters of just, you know, just a quick 10-minute phone conversation. These are the things that I would like to see. I know
We just need to make sure that, since you have so much government experience, you know how not to conduct serial meetings. That's the main thing, right? If you're receiving all of this information as the hub of spokes, you've got to be really careful you're not creating collective meetings. That's
Yeah. Okay, well, Christy and I can engage with Trippevi Smith and see if it's best to do individual calls for input, making sure we don't do a serial or hub and spoke meeting, or if we'll have the ad hoc start to engage, and then we can have a closed session in June to just so the preliminary schedule that was presented is, you know, they would be opening the position in July. So there would be about a month of data gathering. And so we could have a closed session in June and make sure that we have everyone's input. That actually might save more time than having individual meetings. And then that way, before we're even in the process of evaluating the candidates, we'll have all of your input.
And maybe too, in that meeting, could we bring back, because I mean, just based on this feedback and kind of what we've been saying of just what then that process would look like, and I trust too that Trippevi Smith, you know, they've done this enough times that they can recommend what is a good process based on, you know, some of these things that we said we wanted to include, or different types of feedback we wanted to include.
Yeah. Okay, we'll put that on the agenda.
All right, let's open it up to public comment before we come back to authorize these agreements here. Do we have anybody in person that would like to comment? Do we have anybody on Zoom? All right, then I will bring it back to the board for any last minute thoughts on this, or to go ahead and authorize the various staff direction up here under 1 and 2, and then to also as well authorize the ad hoc committee to begin to engage. Need a motion? We do need a motion.
I'll make a motion for item 7.2, 1, 2, and 4, because 3 we're gonna do next time.
That's what it seems like
Okay.
to me, yes.
For items 1, 2, and 4.
All right, the motion from Director Mobley.
I'll second.
And a second from Director Supply. All right, all in favor, raise your hand, vote. Aye.
Bye.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you, folks. And thank you, Trippevi Smith, and look forward to working with you throughout this process. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
All right, and then that'll take us to our interim executive director's report.
Oh, I forgot that I was back on.
You're back
I'm
on.
back on. So quickly, I wanted to make note that we just completed our first audit. It's our first federal audit, correct? For the $6 million USDA funds that we received for the airport market. And the audit stated that all funds were properly accounted for. And the auditor was very complimentary to Lori Bingini, Director Bingini, just on the work that she's done and how cooperative she was to work with. So I really want to express my gratitude. Lori has had a rough couple weeks. So she went straight from the auditor came in from Alaska and posted up in Lori's office for a week. And then this was the week we got back from Massachusetts. So, or maybe, I don't know, it's all a blur. But then and then Lori had Friday, and then started the fiscal year 20 and 21 audits on Monday. So she's working very hard with our auditors, Baker and Tilly, on those audits. And so just really proud of the work that she's done. And we're making a lot of progress. So I think that's it.
All right, thank you, Lori. Yes, yeah, they also sent me the report, and I was like worried, I was like, wait, I hope everybody else knows about this. But that I was gonna add to, they specifically mentioned in the email how great the finance department was working with Lori and everybody, so Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, that is gonna bring us to the end of our meeting. So we have future agenda items. Are there any future agenda items? We talked about obviously a few that are gonna be coming back in June this evening, but anything else that we didn't discuss tonight? And not seeing anything, with that, we are adjourned and our next meeting will be June 27th.